thinking to other people. But, you know, I have, 116,000 constituents, and my constituency is a lot bigger than than most other places in the UK. It's the largest constituency by far. But even when the Isle of Wight sliced into two and it gets 2 MPs, should I be re-elected, inshallah? You know, you're still, the daily work that you do it's really, really difficult to find time to do original thinking. And if there's a problem in modern politics about the pace of life,
that is a good point.
It's actually that you can't sit down and think, what do I think about this? It takes it out of you. It really takes it out of you.
Isn't that what the Conservative Policy Department was all about, where you had the bright young things coming through, that you sort of revive yourself in government, and that was its own internal think tank?
But I get frustrated with people who write the policy ideas but aren't in government.
Yes.
So I'll give you an example. Like next, I think Wednesday, the Wednesday afterwards, I've got this migration bill, which I'm presenting to Parliament, which will mandate that Parliament sets... It's a law to mandate that Parliament will set a legal limit to migration and asylum into the UK. Now, whether it's 10 or 1 million, parliamentarians have to own it.
Yes.
And for me, the only way that parliamentarians are going to grip this problem is by actually owning it in Parliament.
Yes.
And I clearly want to get that idea in the manifesto. It's going to be a struggle for me to do so, because the people that are writing in the manifesto are the people from the think tanks who have their own ideas.
Yes.
But I get this, you know, as Khalid does, I get these issues day in, day out from people on the doorstep. And when you're trying to sort of get that into ideas land, it is sometimes a bit of a sell.
Bob, are you going to launch your PhD and give your big speech when it comes out at the Institute of Public Policy Research?
I did the PhD a few years ago. I'm trying to turn it into a book in the next year or so.
Are you going to launch it at the IPPR?
I don't know, actually. I was thinking of just having a big booze up in having a big knees up. It's an excuse for big knees up in Parliament.
Yeah, it was 2022, I thought you'd finished it.
The red wine there is not great, so we need to find a...
Lucy, think tanks.
Yeah, I think on the whole they're good. They are a force for good, partly because they stress test ideas in a way that, as Bob has identified, individual politicians just don't have the time, they don't have the resources to do that.
Aren't they murky and subversive and operating in the shadows, and we don't know who funds them?
Can I come back on this? If you want...
In a minute.
So the very fact that we've talked about the cross-fertilisation and the way in which they can be cross-party, if people are willing for that, that's surely got to be a good thing, that to have that forum for ideas where you kind of germinate ideas and work out which ones work and which ones don't before you present them to people who are very kind of time.
You road test them. Old-fashioned ideas like road testing.
Stress testing.
Yeah,
them.
absolutely.
And I think that's got to be a really good, because otherwise I can't see of another model that could actually perform that function.
Interesting.
But I know
Matthew. Sorry, go on. Matthew.
Just quickly, for Policy Exchange, you know, all the work that they've done is published in a report, so there's nothing murky. Most of the work that they do is actually on the internet, which they put on their website. So it's all transparent and clear. People may not like what people put out, but that's a different thing. But it is transparent, and people can.
And do you think that the funding of these things is transparent?
Not as transparent as it should be, perhaps.
Okay.
But I think we need to get there in the end.
Okay, Matthew.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think the essential point there is the same one I was going to make, which is that think tanks are extremely public, and that's why they get so much scrutiny and so much criticism. What's not public are lobbyists behind the scenes. It's the role of the civil servants. I think there's actually a lot less transparency in those fields.
We've got a text question in from Gordon in Hampstead, who says, was the European Broadcasting Union right to ban the EU's flag as a political gesture during Saturday's competition? I wasn't aware that this happened, actually. Let me just give you the background to this. The European Union has made an official complaint to the EBU after an official from the European Parliament's Liberal bloc said he was denied entry to Eurovision with the EU flag on Saturday. The EBU's flags policy states that only flags of participating countries and the rainbow or pride flags can be brought into the arena, but a spokesperson for it said that due to heightened geopolitical tensions, the flag, and I can't read the bottom, but you can basically get the picture, the flag was not allowed to be taken in. What do we make of the whole Eurovision thing? Not just about this flag incident, but the broader case of particularly the Israeli contestant who also had all that nonsense to deal with as part of it. Lucy?
Well, the problem is Eurovision has always been political. We've tried for so many decades to pretend that it's a song contest, but actually the way in which... I remember how it was just after we'd voted to leave the EU, that actually everybody nobody voted for us. So I think we had 0 point that particular year. But that, of course, is not
Nothing
a surprise.
Plus ça change.
But that I assumed that this whole issue around the EU flag was because you could only have a nation-state flag, and it would be the ones who were participating in the actual final. I didn't realise that the pride flag was also introduced, so that completely blows that theory out of the water. But I think the problem is it has always been used, and again, to go back to my relationship ideas, that this is what happens. You can try and say, let's everyone get together and have a singing contest, but people's nation, the way in which they operate will always kind of dictate how they behave when they get the opportunity to score some points, literally and metaphorically.
I mean, Lucy's saying it's become inherently political, Khalid, and it has, because if you go back to 2022, they banned Russia from participation, and now they were saying we don't want to be political, we are united by music is the motto, but it clearly is political.
I think there's been a huge issue of total inconsistency at this broadcasting, European broadcasting people. They haven't looked at it, they've not sorted through out. There has been huge issues right from the sanctions against South Africa. When it first started, I used to play rugby, and we know the issues that happened in terms of that was going on. There are all sorts of people who do these things when they take politics seriously. And I think people have a right within the law to express their views properly. And that is it, simple as that.
And the treatment of the Israeli contestant, just briefly?
Well, there was no direct issues in relation to her.
A lot of harassment. I mean, she was hiding in a room.
If people weren't allowed in with the Palestinian flags, they were allowed outside to march, and that was it. There was an instance, perhaps with one of the contestants, which does need to look at in terms of security terms for an individual. There should be no direct violence against any individual.
Understood. Matthew?
Yeah, I mean, there was also this story today of a Norwegian judge who admitted that they'd broken the explicit instructions and decided to not vote for Israel on a political basis rather than on the quality of their song. And I think that there was perhaps a broader tendency where there was this huge difference between the popular vote, where admittedly there was also a political campaign for Israel, as opposed to the jury vote, where Israel didn't do very well, and a kind of an elite, potentially quite anti-Israel opinion. I mean, it does seem more political than the past, but of course, as you've said, Eurovision is always political. It's a question of whether or not it kind of overwhelms any sense of what it's ostensibly meant to be, that it suddenly becomes just political rather than about the quality of the songs.
It's about singing bad songs,
isn't it? The problem is that art is always political in a funny way, because it's a social commentary. And so I always remember the song that Ukraine sung the year that they got invaded. It was a national song, and it was about saying you're never going to break us. And in a way, you do need these forums to be able to say to be able to express those kinds of views.
I actually quite like the breakdancing in that particular Ukraine entry.
Will you give a demonstration?
Sorry?
Will you be giving a demonstration?
I did try and do a windmill, but my Dan Rock is not that good. Bob?
Whatever you think of Israel's actions in Gaza, I thought that the way that the Israeli contestant behaved, I think, was impeccable, and I'm delighted that she did so well in the popular vote. I think the music is pretty dire for most of Eurovision.
I really had to take issue with that. But
it used to be a lot more innocent. I think it's just gone a bit tacky and odd, really. So
you're a Brotherhood of Man person, really, are you?
No, but I'm above ABBA. I mean, ABBA is quality band.
Well, look, can I just say,
what was the last British entry? Walking on Sunshine, not bad.
Yeah,
it was.
No, Sam Ryder, who came second only 2 years ago. We seem to forget that. Actually, we have done quite well.
Occasionally.
Can I just say that the highlight for me was Alcazar singing "Crying at the Discotheque," a Nile Rodgers special, which was a remix of, or at least taking the bass line of Spacer from back in the day.
Why don't we just have decent bands and just pick a decent band rather?
Well, we should. I thought I still can't get my head around the British entry. But anyway, we digress. You're listening to Cross Question. Get your questions into my panel. You've still got time. You know what to do. It's 0345 6060 Text 84850. Ask Alexa to send a comment to LBC. You're listening to Ali Miraj on LBC with Cross Question, and watching us on Global Play. It's 8:32. The news headlines with Daryl Jackson.
The government is expanding the rollout of a life-saving drug to treat people who have overdosed. Ministers want more people to have trained to administer naloxone following an LBC investigation into concerns around opioids flooding the UK. The government will appeal a ruling that plans to deport some asylum seekers to Rwanda undermines the Good Friday Agreement. A judge in Belfast says it's incompatible with human rights protections guaranteed by post-Brexit arrangements. And the Prime Minister has put himself forward as the man to lead the UK through a period of what he called great danger and great opportunity. Rishi Sunak suggested Labour can't be trusted on national security. LBC weather, rain continuing to spread into the east and north tonight, mostly dry elsewhere and a low of 9 degrees.
This is LBC. Cross Question on LBC.
Ali Miraj in for Ian Dale on Cross Question. It's 8:35, and joining me this evening is a stellar panel. Bob Seeley, the Conservative MP for the Isle of Wight, joins me on my left. Bob, as well as being an international affairs expert and former army officer, you served in the forces in Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, and various other campaigns. You also swam the Solent in 2020 for charity. Are you going to swim it again?
I'm doing it in September. I've actually done it a few times. I do it every other year.
Good.
Occasionally.
And who are you raising money for this year?
Very importantly, our West Wight Sports and Community Centre, and thank you very much indeed for allowing me to give them a plug. It's a fabulous sports and community centre, and it's completely kept up by donations from folks in the west and centre of the Isle of Wight, and it's going to be an absolute privilege to raise money for them. We normally raise between £40,000 and £50,000, not obviously just for me, but all of the swimmers.
Excellent. Really, really good. I'm also joined by Lucy Beresford, broadcaster, novelist and psychotherapist, and also a well-being warrior. What is a well-being warrior, Lucy?
It means that at every opportunity, I'm trying to encourage people to live their best life by making changes in their life, whether that's meditation, getting better sleep, being conscious about what they consume, having better relationships.
I'm not going to meditate now, don't worry. And you're also a podcaster. You do On the Couch, your podcast.
I have amazing guests, Ali, actually.
Well, you did interview me for that. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you very much for that, Lucy. Also, Khalid Mahmood, the Labour MP for Birmingham Perry Barr. Khalid, is it true that you were a tight head prop some years ago in rugby union?
Quite some years ago, yes.
This is brilliant. I was a loose head prop at school. I never got further than that. Maybe we can have a... Do you still play at all? Or?
No, unfortunately. No.
But you watch?
No. I watch, yes. A great avid fan of the rugby union.
Fantastic.
It was a great game to play. I came from a comprehensive school. Went to Camp Hill, which is our grammar school in Birmingham. I was invited up there and had a great time, great people to meet with.
Fantastic.
Fantastic game.
Absolutely superb. And Matthew, you, as well as working at the IEA, also have written a number of papers, but also a book back in 2018 entitled Democracy in a Divided Australia. What messages do you have for us in a divided country?
Try to find ways to get along. I mean, it's about the challenge of living in a country where people have such diverse perspectives and finding a way to bring people together over what are limited common values.
Are you hopeful?
Moderately.
Okay, good. I'm glad. At least there is some hope. Our next question is from WhatsApp, actually, from Robbie in Chelmsford. I'm a civil servant, I'm gay, and I'm not going to stop wearing my rainbow lanyard. If they try to discipline me, I'll take legal action. Why should I hide who I am at work? What's the justification for this? Just a bit of background on this for listeners. The Cabinet Office Minister Esther McVey, who is the tagline of being the common sense minister, is planning a crackdown on diversity initiatives within the civil service, including the banning of the wearing of rainbow lanyards, saying this is an example of inappropriate backdoor politicisation of the civil service. Khalid, what do you make of this?
Well, I think if she's seriously looking at this, what does she ban? What doesn't she ban? Does she ban people with a Palestinian flag on it? And then what about the LGBT community? What about other causes that are there? Whether you're a Christian and you want to display that outwardly, or a Muslim. I think she's getting into a very difficult arena to be able to try and do this. Certainly in terms of the LGBTQI, there's been a huge recognition of that in the workplace. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I think we should continue to do that. But she's got to try and address a balance.
It's interesting, though, that you mention it, because it's actually, when you start thinking about it, and it's not that straightforward, because if someone's wearing a religious symbol, a cross, or they might be wearing a hijab, is that okay? But you're not allowing someone to wear a rainbow lanyard. Do you then not allow political symbols, but symbols around your sexuality? What is allowed? Matthew, what do you make of it?
Yeah, look, I've never been a huge fan of lanyards of any description. It does seem like a kind of unnecessary signalling. I'm also, perhaps controversially, don't necessarily buy the idea that you need to bring yourself to work. I think that there is some value in separating your identity. I think it's probably a bit different when it's a religious symbol and it's something you're wearing for that purpose, and it's something you always wear wherever you go. But the problem with the LGBT plus lanyard, so you've got to think about now there's probably two of them. There's one that will have a trans flag in it, one that doesn't have a trans flag in it. Is one political statement making a different political statement? Are you weighing in on a certain controversy that you shouldn't necessarily be as a civil servant? I think that's probably where Sim McVeigh is going. It is a workplace like any other, and if it's a workplace, in fact, with special rules. So I don't necessarily offended by the idea that you can't wear lanyards, but you're probably right. You do then have to be quite universalist about
it. What's wrong with bringing your whole self to work?
It's just this idea that you're allowing your identity to, I suppose, be promoted above whatever else you're meant to be doing in the workplace.
Do you think it's bringing identity politics into the work?
There's a bit of a risk there of it, and it distracts. It can be distract from the real purpose of whatever you're trying to achieve. So this has been a big controversy, more so probably in the US, where there's been certain companies that have said, actually, well, we're not going to allow political discussions in the workplace because they're controversial. We're just going to focus on our mission, whatever our mission may be. And I think you can distract from the core mission if you try to bring too many other things into the workplace.
Lucy.
This could be a niche answer, but for me, a lanyard is part of your uniform in the sense that it identifies where you're working.
Yes.
And I was thinking about, in reference to an event I went to on Friday night at the National Gallery.
You do get around.
It was about, 800 people in the gallery. If you wanted to speak to someone who was representative of the National Gallery, they all had yellow lanyards.
Right.
So all you had to do was identify the person with the yellow lanyard. So my worry is that in an emergency, if you wanted to be able to say who's in our team, who's in that department, is everyone here? Are we out? If you've had a fire alarm or something, you wouldn't be able to identify everyone in your department because
that's quite a niche argument.
It is a very niche argument.
I don't wear a lanyard.
No, but you could have a lanyard, and if you had a global lanyard, it would be in the global branding, and that would be the same in lots of other organisations. So I sort of feel that in Westminster, within the civil service, across Parliament, there ought to be a sort of a way of saying, right, you're part of this house team.
Okay.
And it doesn't.
But this
and
is
everyone has the same.
This
thing.
is very much an identity thing. It seems that for Robbie, it seems an identity
thing. That's the point. I don't think your lanyard is your identity. I
but
think
then
you're
do you
bigger
think?
than that.
But then if someone does feel that way and feels that by being prevented from wearing a rainbow lanyard, that is an affront to their identity, it's some way not bringing their whole self to work, to use Matthew's term.
In a way, if you didn't make exceptions for anybody, if you just said you work in this place and it's a red lanyard or it's a purple lanyard,
I see what your point is.
You're not making a distinction for anybody, and therefore they might have to find a way of identifying themselves or bringing their whole self in another way, but not through the lanyard, because that's not about you. That's about the organisation.
Okay, Bob, 7 million waiting list. We don't know if we're going to get stabbed on the streets. We also have, teachers and nurses and doctors striking and all the rest of it. I mean, is this really a priority?
Dealing with sort of political correctness where it damages the civil service and ethics of the civil service and ability to function, yeah. When it comes to Robbie's specific point, am I going to die in a ditch trying to get him to take his rainbow lanyard off? No.
Well, estimate is.
Well, okay. Then this is the first I've heard of it. It seems to me if he wants to wear his lanyard, he's welcome to do so. Where I draw a line, and I think where a lot of people draw the line, is that equality, diversity and inclusivity stuff has to a certain extent got too far. And I say that for two reasons. One, because just in practical terms, all these people like Stonewall coming in to say things which are very often not legally accurate and which are highly controversial about how many genders there are, etc. I think people have strong disagreement. Many people have very strong disagreement with this, and it is not central to a working life. You should bring your work self to work, and I agree with what Lucy and in fact everyone's been saying here. You bring your personality to work, but you're there for a purpose to work, not to express yourself and say this is about me and my job's all about me expressing myself. And especially as a civil servant, you're there to do the bidding of society. You're there to do the bidding of our society collectively, and that has got to be your primary function at work, not an expression of necessarily who you are as a person. I'm delighted that Esther is cracking down on equality, diversity and inclusivity, because a lot of this stuff is A, a waste of money, and B, it is not actually relevant to people's jobs. The lanyard thing, I mean, whatever.
But it's very interesting on the Stonewall point, actually, that you mentioned, because there is, the jury's out on that. A lot of people take different views, and I think it can be quite controversial. Khalid, I mean, have you had conversations with colleagues about how you navigate this? I mean, how would you navigate it in office?
Well, one of the key things is that there's been a huge amount of police, local authorities, health authorities who've been engaged by MEND, the Muslim Engagement Development Partnership, which is, as far as I'm concerned, doesn't represent my views in terms of the Muslim community.
That's a good point.
And they're allowed to do that. So I think what we need to do is look at the people that are actually allowed to engage with different departments, particularly at government level, whether it's local or regional or national.
I think that's a very good point. Really interesting conversation this evening going on Cross Question. Still got 15 minutes with my panel. Very, very wide-ranging discussion we're having. If you want to get your questions in, you've still got time. 0345 6060 973. You can text on 84850 or ask Alexa to send a comment to LBC. You're listening to and watching Cross Question with me, Ali Miraj, in for Ian Dale on LBC. It's 8:46.
This is LBC. guest. Cross Question on LBC. Text 84850.
Ali Miraj in for Ian Dale on LBC on Cross Question. It's 8:48. I'm joined by my panel this evening, Bob Seeley, Conservative MP, Lucy Beresford, psychotherapist, Labour MP, Khalid Mahmood, and Matthew Lesh from the Institute of Economic Affairs. Our next question is a text question from Graham in Horsham. Are Christians being locked out of public life now? A bit of background on this. The Liberal Democrats have been reported to the Equality and Human Rights Commission over the deselecting of its now parliamentary election candidate, David Campanale, allegedly because he is a Christian. The Lib Dems say it is a home to people of all faiths and none, and pointed out that its party leader, Sir Ed Davey, is a practising Christian. So this is a bit of a murky one. Not sure exactly what to make of this. Khalid.
Well, look, at the end of the day, religion, to me, is a fundamental issue. I believe in it, so therefore, but I don't wear it in my sleeve. I am considered in a position that other people have a right to do so. So I'm not offended by somebody being a Jew, a Christian, a Hindu, or a Sikh. Most of those people exist in my constituency, and I work with them all the time. So it's not a threat to me. Why would somebody would perceive that to be a threat unless they've done something that is not right or improper in removing them as a candidate? But if anybody was to remove based on religion, that would be a very, very sad thing.
But Khalid, it looks like this particular individual, Mark Campanale, was subject to people in his constituency that mounted a campaign effectively saying he was the wrong kind of guy because of his views. Now, if you are someone seeking public office and you're particularly religious and you have a certain view on certain matters, particularly when it comes to abortion, gay rights, where you would typically have free votes in Parliament on these things in the past when you're making laws, is that a problem?
Well, no, that's the whole idea of democracy, is that you stand with your views, you go before the people will vote for you or not. In my very first election...
David Campanale.
In my very first election, I went there and there was a chap who wanted to meet me. I went to meet him and he said, would you vote for the death penalty? I said, no. He said, you want my vote? And I said, thank you very much. And I left. So I think you've got to have some principles when you stand and you stick by those principles. And if people wish to vote for you, they will. If they don't, then they don't.
Interesting point. Bob?
Yeah. I mean, this Liberal candidate, I don't want to big him up, but he actually sounds like, actually quite an impressive candidate. So I don't think that this guy is flawed in any way, or he's up to no good. So I'm afraid to say, and I think it's just that the Liberal left in this country can sometimes be extremely intolerant. And they clearly think that his small c conservative Christian views are not compatible with their liberal left outlook. And that's how it reads to me. And I think that's pretty shaming. Actually, they said we don't want another Tim Fallon because Tim Fallon has...
Tim Farron, yeah. Farron. Yeah, the former leader of the Liberal Democrats.
And Tim, he's got, in many ways, in some of his opinions, probably a bit more conservative than mine when it comes to abortion and maybe gay stuff. I don't know. I don't want to put words into his mouth. But he's a really good bloke, actually, and I think he was very poorly treated by his party. And it sounds like you've got the intolerant members of the Liberal left, again, having a go at David Campanale because they don't like his views. And I'm afraid to say probably Christians are an easier target in this country for various reasons.
Do you think, Bob, that because this is interesting, and this is going to be the topic of my final phone-in for this hour, do you think that Christians in this country today are held to a different standard to those of other faiths, particularly if people want to get into public life?
I think people from different religions are probably treated differently in this country. If this guy was Muslim, it would be difficult to imagine him getting the same treatment. Khalid may well want to come in that point. But I mean, I think Jews are now, I just think Jews are having a tough time of it as well, because there's a lot of prejudice and hostility against individuals because of what Israel, you can defend Israel or attack Israel, but that is, yes, I think there's a growing problem with this, and I think there's a bit of a problem with conservative Christians in this country as well. They seem to be an easy target.
Well, this David Campanale said that he had been humiliated, ostracised and punished during a vote whether to deselect him. Do you, just in response to Bob's point, Khalid, do you think there are different standards in this country for people who are different?
Yes, I agree with Bob. And I think Christianity has been very roughly treated. All others, whether you're a Sikh, a Hindu, a Muslim, a Jewish person, that promotes you to a large extent. But as a Christian, I think people get penalised, and I think that's wrong. I've got very good friends in the church that I worked with, and they're fantastic people to listen to, and the views they put out are right. And in terms of Islam and Judaism and Christianity, we're all of the Abrahamic faiths, and so there isn't a real issue in relation
We seem
to
to have come a very long way since Alistair Campbell said we don't do God.
Yeah.
And I can't help feeling that the Lib Dems in this particular case were perhaps simply thinking about what did happen when Tim Farron was their leader, because there were a number of TV interviews, for example, I think he gave one to a different radio station, where his views were so sincerely held, but they just seemed to be at odds with the majority of people in this country. And I think the party found that, well, it was around on abortion.
So it wouldn't have gone down well in Sutton and Sheen, where this particular candidate was there.
And maybe they just feel they've been burned once too often by having
But do you
that
not think,
particular
that,
profile.
Lucy, do you not think...
Listen, I completely disagree with it, but I can understand why they...
I understand your point, but then is the new religion militant secularism? Is that what we're saying?
That's an interesting one, and I think unfortunately,
I think it's very interesting.
We are becoming so intolerant of so many things that aren't homogenous. And if you show, and we saw this with Kate Forbes and the discussion that there was around whether she would actually even stand.
Matthew.
I think there is a general problem with intolerance of people's views and certainly people being treated differently from different religions. I accept all these fundamental points, although I would still defend the Lib Dems' ability to decide who their candidates are. If they decide,
but they already decided.
They can decide who candidate is and then decide that they no longer want that candidate. They're a private political party. They're choosing a candidate that they think reflects their values. Now, whether or not that is something you may support or you may want to do, they felt that their candidate was had different views. Now, they may or may not have been religiously based. It sounds like in this case it was. We don't really know the full details of why everyone did what they did. But if Lib Dems say, we select this candidate, we don't want to select them anymore because we don't think they represent us, I think that's entirely legitimate choice for Liberal Democrats.
But parties are a broad church.
It's also legitimate for us to say it's a really dumb decision.
Of course.
Yeah, of course.
They and also, it's not just about religion. You had this sort of trans extremism, where to question certain sort of trans ideology was to effectively put your career in danger, and you had to be someone of power and influence in this country, like J.K. Rowling, to actually
too big to cancel.
Yeah, who was too big to cancel.
Yeah,
today I've been abused on Facebook by a Muslim.
Welcome to the club.
By a Muslim who thinks I'm not good enough Muslim.
Oh, I get that all the time.
Exactly. But that's up to them. They can do what they want to do. I respond to them, and tell them exactly.
I do honestly. I take my hat off. I take my hat off to both of you for getting involved in public life, because I do think, honestly, the public sometimes get the politicians they deserve, present company accepted, because they make it so difficult. Let's fit another question in here. This is from Gracie in Leeds. Young drivers might now have to be banned from the road at night and not even allowed to have other young people in the car with them either. Why does this country seem to hate the future generation so much? Very quickly, a bill in Parliament put forward by Labour's Kim Leadbeater has suggested a graduate driving licence, which would see people aged under 25 not allowed to drive at night and not allowed to carry fellow under 25s in the car with them in the first 6 months after passing their driving test. Statistically, men under 25 are 4 times as likely to be involved in a car accident than all other drivers. Lucy.
I think it sounds really sensible. I hate to sound really extreme about it, but I have always worried about the age at which people are allowed to drive. It's 17. And in terms of your capacity for self-control, for some people in terms of their alcohol consumption, or whether they could be egged on by other people who are in their car, it just means that you get given that extra grace period to actually learn how to drive on the road.
Experience.
To get experience as opposed to just taking your test.
I disagree with that. I think you will cut out a huge number of sensible people who want to get on with their lives and do things in the evening or night if they've got to do something in terms of family errand or something else. That they've got
or even if they have to go to work.
Even if there's some of them go night shifts as well, it'd be very difficult for them to do that.
Come to my gigs.
We've still got to stop. Oh, there you go. And we've got to stop doing this nannying stuff a bit too much.
Okay.
And allow 17 is a very, in terms of brain development, 17 is a really young age to be in charge. Have some
other measures around that.
Okay, very quickly, Matthew.
Look, some of the most dangerous drivers are actually older drivers rather than younger drivers. When you look at the full statistics, it does seem a bit outrageous to me to change.
Age warfare is breaking out here, Bob.
Khalid, we're in the age of defections. Are you sure you're not in the wrong party?
I've never been in the wrong party. I've always been in the right party. I've been a good working class engineer.
You want to cross the floor and cross
I've been a good working class engineer, and I will continue to be that.
I think I completely agree with what Khalid is saying. there's too much nannying of people, and I support this. I also think that what Sadiq Khan is doing in London is so bad, because we need to be encouraging nightlife and getting people out.
Well, I'm a big proponent of nightlife, that's for sure. Look, let's just fit in one quick final question. This is the fun one, which always stokes horror in the hearts of every self-respecting panellist. This is from Zach in Watford. A new live video portal between New York and Dublin has been set up, allowing citizens of each city to wave to each other in real time. Where would you most like to have a live video portal to? By the way, this video portal has been temporarily switched off this evening because of what's been described as inappropriate behaviour. Matthew?
Some quite dark inappropriate behaviour according to all reports. I think I'm imagining like something future facing. I want like a TV live screen between Earth and Mars, where we can watch human civilization as they colonise and become a multi-planetary species.
You can hang out with Elon Musk.
Exactly.
Khalid?
Yeah, I mean, look, people, and the problem with social media at the moment is that people bring out the worst in them, and that's what it lets it down. I think if we're all responsible, which we're not in terms of social media, it just ruins the whole project.
Okay, Lucy?
I'm not allowed to say Daniel Craig's home, though.
You can say whatever you want.
So I would do the reverse. I would want a historical one. I would want to wave at Shakespeare.
Oh, very civilised. And Bob?
One. I'm going to pick two. One, Red Funnel ferries at the moment are so dire, so let's have one at Red Funnel so at least people can see if their ferries are running a lot. On a more serious point, I would like to have a lifetime feed into Kharkiv and Odessa so that people can see what it's like to live in a cities that are being bombed by Russian fascists.
Thank you for bringing us back to a sobering thought, a very important one at the end. What a fantastic panel that was. My thanks to Bob Seeley, Lucy Beresford, Khalid Mahmood and Matthew Lesh for a very stimulating discussion. Thank you. Coming up. Now, this is very interesting because we were just discussing this and touching on this in the last hour about this Lib Dem candidate that has been deselected. The Liberal Democrats have been accused of breaking equality laws after an Anglican candidate was allegedly deselected based on his Christian faith. This is David Campanelle, an award-winning former BBC journalist who is the party's prospective parliamentary candidate for the South London constituency of Sutton and Cheam.